Check out this new bodybuilding app that helps you build muscle faster using artificial intelligence with a smart program that levels up with you as you gain muscle. Use the link in the description or just go to drmuscleapp.com/Nick. All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's Strength and Power. So I think it's about time that I made a video on Jay Cutler. So Jay Cutler obviously is a four-time Mr. Olympia, and I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't done a video on him yet. But really, I tend to focus on doing these bodybuilding profile videos on old school guys or older bodybuilders that the younger generation may not have heard of. But now I actually realize the fact that Jay Cutler won his first Mr. Olympia in 2006. A lot of the younger guys watching my channel probably weren't around watching bodybuilding in 2006 to actually witness the Jay Cutler Olympia wins back in the day. I mean, if you're, 13, 14, 15 watching my channel, I'm pretty sure you weren't watching the Olympia in 2006 because you were probably 4 or 5 years old. So in my honest opinion, I think Jay Cutler is one of the most impressive and also underrated Olympia competitors and winners of all time. And the reason I say that is because I feel like Jay Cutler was largely competing in the shadow of the great Ronnie Coleman, who's considered to be one of the greatest Mr. Olympias, if not the greatest Mr. Olympia of all time. 8-time Mr. Olympia, Ronnie Coleman. So as many of you bodybuilding fans may already know, Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman were probably one of the biggest rivalries in bodybuilding history, and they were constantly going head-to-head in the early 2000s, specifically 2001, 2003, 2004, and 2005. Jay Cutler placed second to Ronnie Coleman at all of those Mr. Olympias, and in some cases it was controversially. Like 2001, a lot of people say Jay Cutler could have won that 2001 Mr. Olympia, and it could have gone either way. So the reason I say Jay Cutler is one of the most underrated Mr. Olympia champions of all time is because imagine Ronnie Coleman didn't exist for a second, just hypothetically. So all 4 of those years that Jay Cutler placed second to Ronnie Coleman, not including 2002 because he didn't compete in 2002 because he was trying to get bigger and better to beat Ronnie. So there's 5 years right there. Jay Cutler could have won the Mr. Olympia before his first win in 2006 had Ronnie Coleman not been there. Because honestly, I feel like Jay and Ronnie were in a league of their own. They were both mass monsters. They both had super crazy muscularity, super crazy conditioning, super crazy density. I mean, Jay's back, his legs, his arms, his chest, everything was insanely thick and crazy. I think most of the Mr. Olympias where it was Jay and Ronnie going head to head, it was the Jay and Ronnie show. I mean, no one else was really coming close to those two guys in the top 2. So had Ronnie not been there at a lot of those early 2000s Mr. Olympias, I think Jay Cutler could have easily won every Olympia from 2001 to 2006, and that right there would have been 6 Mr. Olympias, not including his 2007 win, his 2009 win, and his 2010 win. So Jay Cutler could have potentially been a 9-time Mr. Olympia. But unfortunately for him, Ronnie Coleman was there, and Ronnie Coleman did exist, and Ronnie Coleman did dominate the Olympia stage. But again, I think for that reason, Jay Cutler was often overlooked because Ronnie Coleman was such a once-in-a-lifetime, freaky bodybuilder, that Jay Cutler, I don't think a lot of people realize how freaky and how good he actually was, because Ronnie was just that much more freaky. But had Ronnie not existed, Jay Cutler was still a freaky bodybuilder in his own right. Because keep in mind, when you're talking about Jay Cutler, you're talking about a guy that was 5'10", 290 pounds in the offseason, or 132 kilograms, and 260 plus pounds on stage, or 118 kilograms, and 5'10" is not very tall. Now, Jay claims he got his start in bodybuilding by working for his family concrete construction business, starting at the age of 11. So he claims that's why, early on he had a pretty muscular physique, despite the fact that he had never stepped foot in a gym because he had been lifting this heavy concrete pretty much all his childhood. So he really had a good foundation to start out with before he ever even stepped foot in a gym. So one of the things in particular that I found, is really a strong point for Jay Cutler was his ability to make comebacks during his bodybuilding career. So during his bodybuilding career, he had a number of setbacks that he would have to overcome in order to come back and compete at the Olympia. So it all started in 2001 where Jay Cutler failed a diuretics test, which was really, for all intents and purposes, it was kind of bullshit. I mean, they weren't drug testing for, actual anabolics. They were just drug testing for diuretics. Jay Cutler happened to not pass the test. But he ended up getting disqualified, and then later on his placing was later reinstated, and I guess that disqualification was kind of ignored. So it still goes down in the record books that he was the second place finisher at the 2001 Mr. Olympia. And a lot of people speculate that's another reason why he took off 2002 and did not do the Olympia, because he was not sure yet of what the situation was going to be, whether or not his placing was going to get reinstated. I'm sure he probably wasn't very happy with the Olympia people at that point in time. However, in 2002, he would win the Arnold Classic, which puts him in a very elite group of Mr. Olympia winners. So in the history of the Mr. Olympia, there have only been 3 Mr. Olympia winners that have also won an Arnold Classic title. So Jay Cutler, Ronnie Coleman, and Dexter Jackson are the only 3 men to have won an Olympia and also won an Arnold. However, Ronnie Coleman only won 1 Arnold Classic, and Jay Cutler won 3 in 2002, 2003, and also 2004. So the reason this is noteworthy is because typically when a bodybuilder is a top 3 guy or the winner of a Mr. Olympia, they typically won't do a major show like the Arnold that same year because their goal is to peak and bring their best physique for the Olympia. So they spend the whole year kind of focusing on the Olympia and focusing all their training, their dieting, their drug regimens in order for them to peak at this one show, the Mr. Olympia. That's their focus. So it's kind of unique to have a top-level Mr. Olympia competitor compete at a major show like the Arnold Classic because obviously now their goal is to hit 2 peaks that year, which makes it that much harder to place or win at the Mr. Olympia. So it's very unique for a bodybuilder like Jay Cutler, who is the runner-up at the Mr. Olympia, who is obviously desperately wanting to beat the reigning Mr. Olympia to also compete at the Arnold Classic, and he did that 3 times during his competitive Olympia career. In fact, in 2003, he not only won the Arnold Classic, but he won the Ironman Pro, the San Francisco Pro, the Dutch Grand Prix, and the British Grand Prix, and still managed to place second at that year's Olympia, even though he competed in 5 other shows. So then finally we can fast forward to 2006 where Jay Cutler finally defeats Ronnie Coleman and wins the 2006 Mr. Olympia, his first of 4 Mr. Olympia titles. But just like most of the Mr. Olympia competitions, the Mr. Olympias that Jay Cutler won were not without controversy. So the following year in 2007, Jay Cutler's second Mr. Olympia victory would arguably be one of the most controversial Olympia decisions of the 2000s. So in 2007, a lot of people felt that Victor Martinez was at his all-time best. He had peaked perfectly for that show, and that Jay Cutler was off. And that Victor Martinez definitely deserved to win that show. You had guys like Flex Wheeler, Dave Palumbo, major industry guys back in 2007 were shocked that Jay Cutler had defeated Victor Martinez immediately following the 2007 Mr. Olympia. And it was a really controversial decision. You guys can look at these photos for yourself and decide whether or not you think that Victor beat Jay. But that was probably Jay's most controversial Olympia win. And it's also worth noting at the 2007 Mr. Olympia, Ronnie Coleman's placing dropped to 4th. And that would also be where Ronnie Coleman announced his official retirement. So 2008, this is the year that things become pretty fascinating for Jay Cutler's Olympia career. So in 2008, Jay Cutler, the reigning Mr. Olympia, is defeated by Dexter Jackson. So he loses his title in 2008, and Dexter Jackson wins his first and only Mr. Olympia title. But the fascinating thing here is that Jay Cutler comes back in 2009 to reclaim his title, and he comes back looking arguably the best he's ever looked. I mean, these famous photos from the 2009 Mr. Olympia, the quad stomp photo where the separation in his legs looks insane. He's round, he's full, he's conditioned, he's hard. Everything looks amazing. Jay came back and decisively took that Mr. Olympia title back. Now, the reason this is very fascinating because Jay Cutler is the only reigning Mr. Olympia in bodybuilding history to have lost their title during their reign and then reclaim their title and then restart their reign. So Jay Cutler would win in 2009. He would also win in 2010. So you got to think of guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who won 7 Mr. Olympias. Arnold was never defeated during his Olympia reign. He never lost his title, then had to come back and get his title back. Now, he did come back in 1980 to compete again, and he ended up winning, but he was never beaten on the Olympia stage. Then you had guys like Lee Haney. Lee Haney won for 8 straight years. He was never defeated. He never lost his title. You had guys like Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates won 6 straight years, never lost his title. Ronnie Coleman, he won 8 straight years, never lost his title. So typically, in the history of the Mr. Olympia, when a Mr. Olympia is reigning, it is consecutive years. It's not split up by someone coming in and taking the title. That's a pretty fascinating thing that I found with Jay Cutler's career, is not only was he able to come out of that 2007 controversy, then lose his title, but he was able to come back bigger and better than ever and regain his title, and kind of spit in the face of that controversy from 2007 and regain that title from the loss in 2008. So I think that's a very, respectable and admirable characteristic of Jay Cutler's reign as a Mr. Olympia. So as I mentioned before, he would win in 2009 and 2010. Then he would go on to compete in the 2011 Mr. Olympia, where he would place second to Phil Heath, and Phil Heath would win his first of 7 Mr. Olympias. So obviously Jay Cutler would not defeat Phil Heath, but he would compete again at the Mr. Olympia in 2013, following a major bicep tear, where his physique was significantly thrown off at that 2013 Mr. Olympia. And Jay Cutler's placing dropped all the way down to 6th place in 2013, and that's where he stopped competing, although he never officially announced his retirement from bodybuilding. And that brings me to the second point that I wanted to get to today. And one of the things that I find, the most respectable about Jay Cutler is the way that he gives back to the industry, the way he gives back to fans. He's one of the few guys that makes a serious effort to travel to every single expo. He goes to as many meet and greets as he can, as many photo ops as he can, as many expos or trade shows that he can, in order to meet fans and take pictures and sign autographs. And he does all of that for free. I think I've met Jay Cutler maybe 3 or 4 times now. The first time I met him would be back in maybe 2008 or 2009 at Gold's Gym Venice when he was prepping for one of these Olympias. He was like 300 pounds at the time that I met him. Then I met him probably 3 more times at expos, the Arnold Expo. Yeah, probably 3 times at the Arnold Expo, and then that one time in Venice. I probably met him 4 times. And that just goes to show, how much he really does travel and how much he goes out of his way to make sure he meets the fans. And he does it all for free. He doesn't charge for his picture. He doesn't charge for his autograph. He goes to kind of give back to the industry. He doesn't have to do that. I'm sure he's made plenty of money just from winning the Mr. Olympia, being sponsored by major companies like Muscle Tech for a large portion of his career. Then he's got his own supplement line. He's got his own clothing line, Cutler Athletics. So I think you could also make the argument that Jay Cutler is one of the most successful Mr. Olympia winners of all time in terms of, making money off of himself, making himself into a brand, Cutler Athletics. And he seems to be one of the most personal and charismatic guys in terms of just being friendly and interacting with his fans. He's very active on social media and Snapchat and Instagram. He's a very modern-day bodybuilder. So that's really why I think I haven't made a video about him, because he doesn't really strike me as an old-school guy. He doesn't really strike me as an old Mr. Olympia, because he is so active and up-to-date on all the current things with the bodybuilding industry online and social media and all the apps and stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think Jay Cutler is definitely worthy of a 10-minute plus video on this channel. Typically, my videos are closer to 5 minutes. But I think Jay Cutler had such a great bodybuilding career and continues to have such a great career in the industry. He definitely deserved to go over that 10-minute mark. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.